and thanks for joining us for Mid-American Gardener. I'm your host, Tanisha Spain, and joining me in the studio today are two of your faves. We've got Karen and Ella here. Run us through a quick intro as if they don't know who you are, and then we're going to jump in and get started. So Karen, we'll start with you.
Hi, I'm Karen Ruckel, and I'm a gardener in the Peoria area, and I love perennials and houseplants and annuals.
Okay, Ella?
I'm Ella Maxwell, and I'm a master gardener and a horticulturist, and I have a large yard, and I like all kinds of plants and can answer lots of different questions.
Excellent. All right, I put out a post on Facebook that you guys were coming today, and ask and ye shall receive. The first one was, though, two of my favorite presenters. Kathleen Kilmartin wanted to let you guys know that. So let's just jump right in. So Sandra Sward Vandenberg writes, is it too early to cut back my Lenten Rose? It is coming up. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, it was just happened that Karen called me this morning before we left and said, why don't you bring your Lenten Rose? We had looked at some of the questions. So the foliage of Helleborus orientalis will overwinter green, but as the winter progresses and with that, Arctic blast that we had, it begins to really die back. And so this foliage will be replaced coming this summer. But the first thing to bloom with these are the flowers that emerge from the crown of the plant and the, center. The center kind of opens up like this with the flowers right here in the middle. And so the best time is before the flowers really emerges to cut off all these spent dead leaves. And so you could go through on a nice day now in February or early March and cut back all of the spent foliage.
Okay.
So
When I saw a comment that on another chat with somebody that they thought you had to trim them back to make them flower. And you're not doing it to make them flower, you're just cleaning it up and opening it up so that the flowers aren't in amongst kind of this blah, drab kind of mess.
Gotcha. Okay.
Right.
More of a maintenance.
Tidying, yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. Next question. We don't have a name for this one, but it was sent in via email. And it says, I would like to plant a Auga ground cover around the base of a red maple tree. Picture is attached. Do you think it will grow well there? Thanks for your help. So we've got the picture here, and they want to know if they can grow some Auga there.
The answer is yes, no. So yes, you can. No, it might be a little bit tougher. With the picture, we don't know how much mulch is around that tree, and you don't really want to add a lot of mulch at the base of the tree. But the Auga certainly might be happy, but it's getting it watered enough that it'll stay. And so I did bring in some Auga from my yard, and they grow with these little rosettes of the foliage. And then in spring, the center will flower, and then it sends out these little runners. So all the plants, oh, where did your runner go? Oh, here it is. These plants will send runners, and then your new little plant will root off of that. And they do have very nice, vigorous roots. So once you get an established plant, they will take a little bit of drought, but it's getting it going. And then in drier years, you might have to supplement water to keep that patch happy.
And they spread. They don't grow up. So you're
Correct.
not going to, height-wise, what would you say? I mean, it is a ground cover.
Oh, flat, just a couple
very,
inches.
very
But the
short.
bloom stalk will come up on some of the different varieties, maybe 5-6 inches.
Okay. And then how long would you say from planting would you have that vigorous patch that is kind of self-sustainable? Does it take a really long time to establish?
Well, like most of your perennials, yeah, it'll take a couple years because that first year you plant them and you're like, oh, they just sit there. And then the next year they kind of take a little bit hold. Then the next year's when they really go.
Okay. So you got to be patient. Got to be patient. All right. Let's go back to our email question. There was another one about Kyle wrote in, and we touched on this, but we're going to go for it again. When can you prune lilac? So Ella, you were kind enough to go out and grab some.
yes, well, all right, so there's several different kinds of lilacs. There's the old-fashioned large lilac that has large flower scapes and very scented, can get 10 to 12 feet tall, can have rather large stems, a couple of inches in diameter. And then there's the more dwarf forms. But the one thing about all the lilacs and some of these other plants I'm going to show you is that the buds were formed last year so that when spring comes, the buds are already there with the flowers, And so as far as pruning goes, you don't want to prune in early spring before they flower. You wait until after they flower, and then you can do your pruning. So for example, we have forsythia, and we look at this more up close, and we can see
loaded.
the buds over it. And then this would be, something that we could talk about forcing. Or of course, in trees, we have magnolias, and the buds are very evident, the ones that would open into flowers. We've got a little flowering dogwood here, which didn't really set a lot of flowers this year. I'm going to be kind of disappointed, but they look like these little Turk's caps here. And then even on our red bud, we can see flower buds all up and down the stem. So every spring blooming shrub or tree, the flowers have already been formed. So these kinds of things to prune would wait until after flowering. And then they wanted to know, how would you do that? So we're going to pretend that this is our gangly lilac, and I do have a pair of pruners here. So the first thing we might do is possibly they have what they call renewal pruning, where you're going to take like a third of the plant out.
Wow.
Potentially. So maybe we just take out, we cut this, and we take this big tall one out. Now we've got a little bit better shaped plant, and now we can maybe, again, after flowering, come back and then just lightly trim it back into more of a rounded shape, and we're kind of done, because we've taken out maybe a third of it, and we've taken out something that's, kind of not in the frame of the reference of the plant.
So folks are concerned with, like you said, gangly plants, but just enjoy the blooms, get through that, and then trim them up.
Right.
Even
and
if they're misshapen and kind of crazy, let them flower first.
Right. And that's, again, no pruning late in the fall. This is something,
or even late summer, because
Right.
you can prune it later on in the summer, but then you're not going to give enough time for that plant to grow
Right.
that growth and to form the buds for then the next year.
Gotcha.
So again, experiment. If you do lose the flowers for one season, well, that's okay. It's better, though, to choose the right plant. Lilacs come in a lot of different sizes now, from the old-fashioned really tall ones to some quite dwarf ones. Even there's one called Bloomerang that's a rebloomer that will bloom again sporadically in the fall. And with the weather, my old-fashioned lilacs this past year rebloomed.
Did they?
So I'm going to have less of a flower display this spring, because they've already leafed out. That bud burst open.
And I'd rather have a wonky lilac full of blooms than
Right.
one that's been hacked and now you have to wait.
Sure, cut the flowers. Don't neglect the fact that you have a beautiful lilac with a wonderful scent that you can bring in as a cut flower. I think so many times we just don't take advantage of the fact that we have beautiful plants and flowers, and let's appreciate them, in our home or as a gift. Take a bouquet to someone. There was a teacher at school that always loved lilacs. So
Score some cool points with
There
the
you
teacher.
go.
All right. Karen, we're going to go to you for a tomato question, because I know you love tomatoes. Roxanne Center writes in, how early can we in East Central Illinois start our tomato seeds indoors? I am chomping at the bit. We hear you. We understand you. When can you do that?
Well, typically you don't want to do about 6 to 8 weeks before frost, and last frost. So we're, even though they said that, we're in a new zone, at least for us in the Peoria area, we're still, have dicey weather up until about, that Mother's Day in May. And so it's going back on the calendar and take into account that, because if your plant gets too leggy, then you've got more of a hardening off situation out in the garden, because you started it so early and it got so long. But then remember that if that plant is leggy, that you'll want to take off some of those lower leaves and bury it deep when you put it out in the yard.
Kind of at an angle, though.
Well, you
kind
can
of
do
angled
two different
up.
ways. If you've got a good well-drained soil, you can dig straight down and put
Right.
it straight down. If not, then you can do a little trench and then, do a little stick to hold them up.
So yeah, we're going to say don't start before the 1st of March.
Don't start before and as a person who has been that eager person to start, nothing's worse than having to repot a 72 cell flat of plants that have outgrown their home and still can't quite go outside yet. I've
Right.
been there.
And one of the things to start now, if you really are looking to start something, would be if you wanted to grow onions, or maybe you wanted to start some parsley, or something, maybe even by the middle of the month, the cool weather cabbages and such possibly. But tomatoes are warm weather. It's really better to wait and get a grip then.
Okay, all right. Let's see, Pegman wants to know, how do landscapers manage to kill off weeds under a tree without hurting the tree roots? Some trees have a wide area that's clear, and she said this is a stumper for her. So
Okay.
take us to school.
All right. First off, you can do a really good job with mulch and like newspapers. I don't really recommend putting any kind of landscape fabric underneath mulch because it breaks down and becomes soil, and then you have soil on top of a landscape fabric and you could have some weed problems. So I'm not sure exactly what idea she has, but I just wanted to give us a little idea about herbicides. So herbicides are products that kill green plant material. And so there's mode of action. So each chemical has a different kind of mode of action, and I read that there are 7 different kinds of the way that they affect the plant and the physiology of the plant and how it's going to die. But most of the time when we're talking about chemicals, we're talking about either or. So we have 2 different kinds of chemicals. Something that's pre-emergent that we use maybe before the weed seed would germinate or before the seed would come up, or post-emergent after the weed is already there. So you have to decide, how's that going to work? The pre-emergent is the crabgrass control that you might get as a step 1 in your lawn care program. And the post-emergent is when you're maybe spot spraying some weeds. Then we move to, here's another one of our 2. Do they kill on contact, or will they move systemically in the plant? So contact kill, it actually kind of burns the foliage. It doesn't really move. Systemic means it's absorbed into the plant, and it can actually be translocated or moved throughout the vascular system of the plant. And so this would be something like a Roundup. And again, all of these chemicals have lots of different mode of actions, and then we also need to know, what are they going to kill? So some of them are non-selective and some of them are selective, meaning that they will kill the broadleaf weed. So that would be like a weed and feed that you could use in your grass because it's going to kill the dandelions, the broadleaf weeds. But there are other herbicides that will kill grass type weeds that maybe you would want to use in a landscape bed. And then of course some of the ones that you need to watch out for again are these non-selective. They just kill anything that you spray it on. And then the last thing, and I didn't write it down, I should have, I was going to, is does it have a residual or does it break down in the soil right away? So what that would mean is that it stays in the soil and continues to provide some type of control, or after a couple of days, if the weed has died and you've removed it, is there anything left? So each product you have to selectively research to decide, is it going to be the one that you want to use? And there have been some unfortunate problems have developed with different chemicals. There was one on the market that they didn't realize was absorbed by tree and shrub roots. And so it was applied, you know, on the lawn, but it killed trees. It killed trees along, you know, in their yard. They had no idea. Again, you have to choose the right kind of product, research it, and I know it's overwhelming, but you have to follow the label. That's the law, and that tells you how the product works, gives all the environmental information about it. So for me, under trees, you know, some type of cardboard or newspaper and some nice mulch gives you pretty well something nice for at least a season or more. And then maybe you have to do the hard work of raking it off and replacing it or fluffing it up to keep it, you know, looking nice. What do you think,
if all else
Karen?
fails, don't forget to call your local extension office.
Yes, yes,
sure.
or again, a knowledgeable horticulturist at an independent garden center.
Wink. Anything to add to that, Karen?
Well, I think also with that question is, you know, sometimes we don't know, is it affecting the tree that they've used these chemicals, and is it maybe there are some effects but they're not showing it, and maybe a year of drought, those chemicals added that extra little stress that didn't help the tree.
Gotcha. So lots and lots to study, and just make sure you're getting the right product for the job.
And don't use chemicals if you don't have to. I mean,
Good advice. Yes.
that's what I'd go for.
All right. Karen, you've got some unfortunate news about your dahlias.
Yeah, you know, I'm you know, fanatic with cannas, and I've got that overwintering down pat. And I've don't usually do dahlias because I've got a heavier soil, and digging them out, they just don't work. So last year I did one in a pot, and it was just gorgeous.
Oh, it was
did
gorgeous.
bouquets of it. It just was lovely. So then I got this little bee and tried to think, oh, I'll try maybe a different overwintering way, because typically I would just dig up the dahlia tuber, and you'd have the tubers, and like Ella, we forgot to bring hers, and you would just overwinter it as a whole unit and then just replant it that way. Well, I this fall did this online mini course with dahlias, a tutorial, and you know how to do it and everything, and it went so in depth with, you know, on the tuber you've got to look for an eye, the neck of it, and the tuber. And you can divide them in the fall and then store them that way. And I'm like, oh, I'm all jazzed about this. You know, I want 10 plants, not one. And so I followed all the directions, and I did this cute little shoebox and put my label of what the flower was and did the mixture. And I think, I even put cinnamon in here to help with fungus. And then now we're not even to spring yet, and I already know that I didn't make it. So my shoebox is now, unfortunately, a coffin for my dahlias, and this beautiful dahlia now I don't have. So
Better luck next year.
But the woman in the mini course did say that typically your first year with doing this division and overwintering them, you may not be successful. So I don't know that I want to try it another year. But
See, they're just like us, folks. Not everything always makes it, even though a lot of the things they store over winter makes it. But this is one of those instances where it just didn't survive. So now what? Will you try this again? You said you don't know. You're thinking about it.
I think if Ella gave me one of hers that she didn't want, and I could experiment once again doing the division and looking intently on it for the eye, keeping the neck intact with the tuber, yeah, I'd try it again.
Sure.
But
how are those cannas looking? Have you given them the old check?
no, I have not even peeked at them because they're kind of covered with stuff. So I'd have to move a lot of things to get to them.
I'm sure they're fine though, because like you said, you've got that one.
They
down
better
pat.
be, because I'd be really sad.
All right. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just going to say that overwintering things is a real trick. I mean, I'm overwintering some things in my garage. I'm overwintering some things in my basement. I'm overwintering some things, like the dahlias like to be a little warmer than the cold, so they're upstairs in a closet, you know, so yeah, you open my closet, you don't know what you're going to find.
Who knows what you'll find in there. Let's see, Martha sent in a photo, and we had Phil Nixon on a couple of weeks ago, our bug guy, and he was talking about wasps and yellow jackets. And so Martha sent in a picture, wants to know if this, she said last week you featured an expert on wasps, and he did mention yellow jackets. She wants to know if the picture she sent in is a yellow jacket. She said there's so much pollen on it she can't tell. So let's take a look at that. And Ella, what are your thoughts?
Right. Of course, when you see any kind of an insect with a whole bunch of pollen on it, a flying insect, it's probably a bee, and that happens to be a bumblebee right there. The one thing about wasps is that they are hairless. They also have a very constricted body shape, so they look considerably different. And if you just went online and Googled wasp and looked at some images, you could certainly tell. Now, they can be striped with yellow and black, like the yellow jacket that kind of mimics some of the coloring of honeybees and some bumblebees. But when you see a bee, she has hairs covering her entire body. Actually, her compound eyes have hairs coming out of it. Her whole body is covered, and as she flies, she creates a charge, an electrical charge, and the pollen is negatively charged, and so when she lands, actually some of that pollen can just kind of jump on her like
static cling.
Wow. Static electricity. And then, of course, she has bees, and they're usually females, pollen gathering for their young that they're going to either, store in a honeycomb or in their little ground nests or wherever. But they have those, and they can just actually, use their little arms to scrape off that, and then they have special, like little baskets that are kind of woven on, I think it's the third leg that they can pack, and that's where you see those little pollen patty-likes. Yeah, and they do have special traps on hives where they can collect pollen, and some people use pollen, for health purposes. You can get pollen. So if you see pollen on an insect, it could be a beetle, but it's not a wasp. It's more likely a bee.
More likely a bee if it's covered in pollen. All right, I'll be looking for that. All right, Karen, you've got a succulent that you brought in.
Yeah, this is, I was going to bring this and talk about the use of a houseplant like this in such a small pot, and that I was going to take it out of the pot and do a root pruning, almost like you'd do a bonsai, to still keep it in this small little pot. Or you could do cuttings, because this little pot I actually have by my fairy house, because, you got to have potted plants around your house, and it's out in the full sun, so I did a succulent. But it's that time of the year that you can find problems with your house plants. And deep inside here, I noticed that I've got the beginning of mealybugs. So mealybugs are common, but since I don't use chemicals on my house plants, just as a precautionary because I have cats, I will probably just throw this away, because you can use like rubbing alcohol to try to kill them. But I've found that over time that it seems like even the little fluffiness, you don't know, does that have eggs in it? And then you just keep trying to fight the problem. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to find a new plant for going in my pot for next year.
But don't you think this is something small enough that you could really dunk it kind of in maybe like a soapy water solution or something?
Oh,
so
Ella just got herself a new plant.
I want the pot though.
But not the pot.
I don't think soapy water is going to cut it. I've never even chemicals. I think, now I can't take a picture of it.
Oh shoot! Well, there's probably more in here.
So anyway, the mealybugs are a very tough houseplant.
They are.
Because
Oh, here's some more.
They get
Here's some
down
more.
in the cruxes. Sometimes it seems like they're even a little bit at the top of the soil, right by the stems. They're very hard to control, and they're very tenacious with how they
Yikes.
live on a plant.
Right.
Okay. Well,
And it's also, I'm sorry,
no, go ahead.
that's one thing to be very cautious when you're at stores looking at houseplants, because some of the retailers, with how long they hold their inventory, you can get a bloom of these. And so it's actually, looking down in your houseplant before you bring it home from a store.
And you
Right.
won't even know it. So we've got about a minute left. When you're looking through the foliage, what do you look for?
A white little glumps,
Right, or stickiness,
Okay.
because they feed on the sap of the plant or something. And actually, I had a little wipe here that I was cleaning my pruners with. I went on vacation. The people, when we went to a tropical area, the people had some house plants, and I noticed that they had mealybugs. So I used my little airplane wipes, and I wiped all their leaves, because
You can take the girl out of the nursery.
it was the least that I could do for helping them through. I don't know. The plant seemed to be doing okay, but it either had like a cottony aphid or a mealybug.
All right, we're out of time. It goes so fast. Thank you so much, guys. Always a pleasure when you come in. Thank you so much for watching. If you've got questions, you can always send them in to us at yourgarden@gmail.com, or just search for us on socials, look for Mid-American Gardener, and leave us a question there. And we will see you next time. Good night.